On Yud Tes Kislev, there is a custom to make a siyum hashas, finishing the shas every single year. There's a chalukas hashas, entire shas is divided. There's a special letter that our Rebbe wrote to Rabbi Altein in Pittsburgh in the year 1949. The Rebbe in general was very positive in his letters. Only very few people would the Rebbe be able to talk directly to them. One of them was Rabbi Altein, and the Rebbe told him, from the city of Pittsburgh, only two people, you and Rabbi Posner, have joined the Chalukas HaShas, learning the Masechta of Shas. You've been so many years in Pittsburgh. He was there for 3 years, and Rabbi Posner was there for 5 years. So many years in Pittsburgh, and yet it's all you have accomplished so far. And this is just something even the Yetzer Hara doesn't fight so hard against, learning Gemara. What about learning Chassidus, which is your main focus in town? So Baruch Hashem, in the next room, there's the Chalukas HaShas, and Baruch Hashem, the entire Shas, Mishnayos, has been divided already once. But if you'd like to learn the Masechta of Shas or a few Masechtas of Mishnayos, please see Rabbi Bassman or myself, and we'll have you signed up. And those who learn even one Masechta, it's considered as if they learned all the Masechtas. You have a part in it all. Now, to make a siyum as well on Tanya, we're going to call up the Rabbi Yosef Silverman, who is also celebrating the Suda Seidah, to come and make a siyum on Tanya.
Brief siyum of the Tanya, Baruch Hashem. Is this the mic here? There's the mic. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So doing a siyum of the Tanya first, begin with that. The last part of the Tanya, Kuntres Acharon, it speaks about the importance of tefillah and davening. And at the end of the chapter, talks about learning, dividing the shas, and we'll just pick the last few lines. It's known to the people who know Kabbalah. The whole mitzvah yesh panemius chatzonius. Every single mitzvah has a panemius, an internal aspect, and an external aspect. For chatzonius me'Shabbos u'shvisus ma'aser gashmis, and the external aspect of keeping Shabbos is the physical actions that we stop doing. Kamo Shabbos Hashem asos shemayim v'aretz gashmi, just as Hashem finished making the physical world on Shabbos. Upanemius of Shabbos, but the inner dimension of Shabbos, hiya kavana b'tefillah haShabbos, is having the intention, the kavana, and our davening on Shabbos. Ubetalmud Torah, and in Talmud Torah, the main thing, l'davka b'Shem Echad, to cleave to God, to Hashem Echad. K'mashkasuv Shabbos l'Shem Lakecha, so he b'chines Zochor. Keeping Shabbos will be dedicated to Hashem, your God. And that's the aspect of Zachor v'Shamor, keeping Shabbos, remembering Shabbos. And what's the guarding things you don't do? It's stopping speaking about physical matters, worldly matters. Just as Hashem stopped speaking about the words that brought about the physical earth and the heavens, so too we have to watch our speech to make sure we don't talk about things that we shouldn't talk about, like physical things. Because one thing opposite the other Hashem made. So that's the conclusion of Tanya. We can celebrate. Just a brief word that I'd like to thank Hashem publicly and thank all my family and friends who are here. Baruch Hashem, a year ago, I got the good news that we needed and hoped for from an illness that I was cured from. And thank God we were able to celebrate it this year, and God willing, many more years. The idea of putting all of our hope and trust in Hashem Yisborech, and that really, I thank a Chassidus that gave me the opportunity and the ability to know how to face a challenge, and to really have the ability to know that this is everything is Hashem. There's nothing else besides Him, and we see that, and the panemius of everything is it's all going to be good. And we're seeing it in the world right now with the Mashiach is really coming. So many things are happening every day. You look at the news, and too numerous to mention. And so it's not just for me, but it's for all of us. People said it was the idea of Yud Tes Kislev started with the Suda Sodah, and we're still here to this day with the Suda Sodah for hundreds of years later. So it should be that this will be the last Suda Sodah in Golus, and we should be able to begin the Tanya tomorrow morning with the Geula. Thank you. You should go ahead.
Yasher Koyach, Rabbi Silverman, many, many more happy, healthy, Hatzlachadika years. We shall go together with you to Mashiach very soon. I'd like to call upon the Mara de Asra of our community and the head shliach to Pittsburgh, Rabbi Rosenfeld, to come and share with us a few words. Thank you.
First of all, L'chaim, Gut Yontif, as we have the sign written up, L'shana Teva, B'limud Chassidus, B'darkei Chassidus, Tikasevo, B'seichasemo, and we should have a good, gesund yar in every possible way, as Rabbi Silverman just mentioned. L'chaim. Reb Chaim Itkin just mentioned a letter from the Rebbe that was sent to Rabbi Altein many years ago, in which he wrote about the lack of those participating in Chalukas HaShas back then. But obviously since then, as we heard, there has been the Chalukas HaShas in Pittsburgh, where the whole Shas was divided amongst just the community of Pittsburgh, and this has gone on for several years already. And again, this year, if anybody wants to participate, I believe it's already done, but if somebody wants to also participate, they can be added to it as well. So make sure to contact either Rabbi Bassman or Rabbi Itkin to be sure that you're included in it, and then we send it settled to the Rebbe with all the information of all of those that participate in the Chalukas HaShas. It's interesting, I mentioned this letter because there's an end to that letter. Besides the Rebbe writing to Rabbi Altein about the lack of there being more participants in the Chalukas HaShas, the Rebbe also writes something very interesting in that letter. And the Rebbe writes that what the Rebbe would like to see, and this was written way back when Rabbi Altein and Rabbi Posner had just recently arrived, 3 or 5 years before, but the Rebbe writes then that what he would like to see Pittsburgh become is an area where, when the Alter Rebbe comes through Pittsburgh, he should find a lot of shemus on the street. Meaning there's so much going on in terms of learning Chassidus that there's even shemus on the floor of Chassidus, and the Alter Rebbe feels comfortable because he's coming through a community that he can feel that this is his community. So I think Baruch Hashem, we've come a long way from where we were many years ago. We've come a long way in terms of Kanain Hara. We have a large community. We have different shuls in the community, different communities in our community, different Chabad houses out in our community, different shluchim in our community, and many, many chassidim in our community that sit and learn chassidus from the early morning. You come to shul here, you can see 6 o'clock in the morning, there's a share of 20, 30 people on occasion. And on the average, 20 people sitting and learning, 6 o'clock in the morning chassidus, and many shiurim throughout the entire day. So Baruch Hashem, we've come a long way, and it's certainly a beautiful Chassidish community, and obviously, Elu Devarim She'ein Lahem Shir. There's no limit, and this goes on not just amongst the men, there are beautiful shiurim going on amongst the women, amongst the kollel that exists for the men, the kollel that exists for the women, with beautiful programs going on, with giving people the opportunity to participate in limud HaChassidus and learning Chassidus. You know, we say that Yud Tes Kislev is the Rosh Hashana of Chassidus. What does that mean, it's the Rosh Hashana of Chassidus? Does it mean just that we have to make a commitment to learn a little bit more Chassidus? It certainly means that too, but more than even that, it means that we have to begin to live our lives with what we learn in the Chassidus. So that when we learn whatever it is that we're learning about, whatever it is that we learn, whether it's a pasuk in Chumash, whether it's a Maimer Chazal, whether it's somebody learning a Daf Yomi even. And there are plenty of Chassidim that learn Daf Yomi. But when you learn a Daf Yomi like a Chassid, you understand what it's all about. You understand the deeper meaning of what it means. And even if it seems like it's something that's not understandable, you say to yourself, let me look in Chassidus and see how Chassidus explains it. How Chassidus gives a deeper meaning to it, gives me a feeling to be able to better understand it, better learn it, and better live my life because I've learned this piece of Chassidus. There are so many people who, after they've begun learning Chassidus, whether it's Tanya, whether it's a Sicha, whether it's a Maimer, they live their lives totally differently. As Rabbi Yosef Silverman just mentioned, talking about the Bitochen in the Eibishter. Simply you talk about Bitochen in the Eibishter like another mitzvah, you have to have Bitochen. No, shame, so you have Bitochen. But if it's, in the end, it's still difficult. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it if it's still difficult? So, yeah, the Rebbe teaches us that if you have Bitochen in the Eibishter, the Bitochen in the Eibishter enables it to become even better. And to see through the challenges, the difficulties, and to recognize that in fact, there's really something good in it. We may not see it yet, but as the Rebbe once said, the Rebbe wrote to one of the prime ministers of one of the presidents of Eretz Yisrael, the early presidents, that the Rebbe, when he was a child, the Rebbe writes this, from the time that I was a child, I couldn't understand what the pasuk tells us, that when Mashiach will come, we'll be able to understand that all the challenges that Yidden had throughout Golus were really for good. And the Rebbe said, for that alone, that when Mashiach comes, I'll be able to understand that, how all these challenges, and the Rebbe had obviously gone through the war and known what went on in the war and all the different challenges up until then. And the Rebbe says, I can't understand how it's possible to understand that that's really for the good. And the Rebbe says, I'm yearning for Mashiach for that reason alone from the time I was a child in Cheder. The concept is that we understand and we truly believe that when Torah tells us something, it's real. When Torah tells us, when the Rebbe shares with us that Mashiach is coming, so everybody says, it's a nice idea, and Yidden over the years have believed in it, and we continue to believe in it, and in Yud Tes, someday it's going to happen. There's an expression, it says, I await every day that Mashiach should come. That's a simple definition. I am awaiting Mashiach for him to come every day. And the Rebbe says that's not the way to explain that. It's achakalei b'chol yom sheyavei. I await Mashiach that he should come, and every day I await that he's coming today. Not that I'm awaiting him that he's going to come whenever. That b'chol yom sheyavei, every day. Today, I'm awaiting him to come today, not tomorrow. And so too, when we talk about Mashiach today, the Rebbe has told us that Higias man gulaschem, and we wonder, and the world says, yes, but what's occurring? And again, look at the reality of the world. Anybody that wants to, as the Rebbe says, open up their eyes and see what's going on and truly understand the meaning behind these things, there's only one meaning. The way the world is being transformed and being transformed so quickly in a way that the only way that anybody that really wants to understand it can say, this must be the times of Mashiach. And if you learn through the Gemara, what the Gemara talks about, the times of Mashiach, and it describes these kinds of things actually happening. And we see those kinds of things happening in front of our eyes. And again, as Chassidim, living like Chassidim, what it means is that we truly have to believe that that is happening now. And how does that affect what we do? What it means is, as a result of that, let's live like Mashiach. And I've even used the expression, Mashiach is here. What it means is we have to live our lives like if Mashiach is walking in the door, we're not going to say to Mashiach, hold up a second, let me put on my jacket. I'm ready for you to come in. I'm ready for you. I've done what I need to do. Not give me a chance to do one more mitzvah. I've done that mitzvah. I'm ready to greet you. So we have to live our lives now like Mashiach is here. We have to open our eyes, ready to receive Mashiach right now. So l'chaim, the Eibusha should help that we should truly be permeated with Chassidus. Yud Tes Kislev should give us the chance to be able to understand what the Rebbe taught us, what the Rebbe instilled with us, and anybody that, and some of us were there at the Farbengens, particularly the Yud Tes Kislev Farbengens. I remember those were the Farbengens that were unbelievable. You know, to say a Farbengen was unbelievable is ridiculous to say, but I can tell you from all the Farbengens, the Yud Tes Kislev Farbengens were the unbelievable ones, both in times of the length of the Farbengens. They went on for hours and hours and hours, and in terms of what the Rebbe spoke about, so many beautiful concepts, from deep concepts in Gemara, deep concepts in Chassidus, deep concepts in what's going on in the world. And the people that participated in those Farbengens were people from all over the world, from any Jew, from the one that wasn't yet religious to the most religious. A Yud Tes Kislev Farbengen, everybody knew, everybody comes to the Yud Tes Kislev Farbengen. And this was the time. Why did they come? Because they knew this was a time to be inspired. It's, as was mentioned, it's the Chag HaChagim, it's the Yontif. On a Yontif, it's not just let's celebrate and dance and sing. It's an opportunity to, whatever we do on the Yontif, we have a greater koyach, a greater power to be instilled with whatever it is that we do. If we're joyful today, it accomplishes so much more for ourselves than if we're joyful just any day. It accomplishes that we can be joyful with our mitzvahs. It accomplishes that we can have more bitochen in the Eibishter. So today is the day to accomplish whatever you want in the best possible way. L'chaim, we should be Chassidim. We should make the Rebbe proud of us, as the Rebbe writes in his letter, so that the Rebbe can be looking at us and participating in our Farbengen today and saying, wow, this is unbelievable. Chassidim in Pittsburgh are Farbengen, excited about Yud Tes Kislev, and inspired to continue to live as Chassidim should. L'chaim.
We actually booked a choir that they were coming from New York for tonight's event. Problem was, they're working on Chabad time. And the time they left, they realized they weren't going to make it on time. So we're all going to have to be the choir tonight. So you can help me out to drown out my voice. Getting there. As Rabbi Rosenfeld mentioned, there's shiurim going on day and night. The one particular learning which I would like to point out, it's on your tables, it's Koilel Dach, under the auspices of Rabbi Bassman. It's international. There's a full curriculum with top-tier Megiddo Shiurim. They give you booklets what to learn. You could register for it. From Pittsburgh, there's over 12 members, over 200 worldwide. There's top mashpiyim, Rabbi Farkash, Rabbi Klein, and others who give shiurim, have special Farbengens, monthly Farbengens, and it's a beautiful program, and there's a special rate for the Pittsburgh community. It's be very special to join. As it says in the letter in the beginning of the Hayom Yom, letter from the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab was not in Lubavitch 1 year, the year 1901. Tafrei Shamach Beis. Instead, he was busy. He was in the capital city, Pittsburgh, the city where the Alter Rebbe was arrested and where the redemption took place, because at that time there were still many persecutions, pogroms against the Jews, and at that point in time, about 30 prominent Jews from the city of Vitebsk and Minsk were arrested, and for no reason, and the Rebbe Rashab was busy freeing them. All their property was confiscated by the government. He had to get it sent back to them. And the Tomchei Tamim Yeshiva just moved to Lubavitch from the town of Shadrin. It's only their second year in Lubavitch, third year, and they really wanted to be by the Rebbe Rashab for Yud Tes Kislev. Because unlike us, who we could say our generation was maybe a little bit spoiled, the Rebbe Farbring for us so many times a year, and spoke sichas even when he didn't Farbring for us. The Rebbe Rashab would say a maimer every single Shabbos, would Farbring only 3 times a year. On Simchas Torah, on Yud Tes Kislev, and on Purim. 3 Farbrengens a year. And if you're missing a Yud Tes Kislev Farbrengen, it was a very big deal. And the Rebbe Rashab was going to miss Yud Tes Kislev in Lubavitch. And it was a tremendous downfallen, crestfallen attitude in the whole Lubavitch, until the Rebbe Rashab sent a special letter, which was printed in the beginning of Yom Yom. The copy of it is printed in the beginning of the Kuntra Sumayan, which among the things the Rebbe Rashab says, V'karev be'enai, it seems very clear to me, it seems close to say, this is the Rosh Hashana of Chassidus. When the Frierdiker Rebbe reprints it, he says, Hayoim hu Rosh Hashana ladach. As the Rebbe prints it, the Frierdiker Rebbe added, today is Rosh Hashana of Chassidus. When the Rebbe was asked, the Rebbe Rashab said, V'karev be'enai, I think it's Rosh Hashana of Chassidus. Why didn't you write that? He says, what's a maybe by a Rebbe, it's a vadai, it's a definite by us. And therefore, in Hayom Yom, it's written as a definite. It's a day which our life, or v'chayes nafshenu nitan lanu, is definitely given to us. And he gives a bracha, quoting the Pesukim, Ma'amakim Krasicha Hashem, may Chassidus make that we should open up the depths, the inner part of our hearts, to get rid of any bad character traits and to only have good character traits. Many years ago, sounds like many years ago, I was in yeshiva in Toronto, so we had a bacher from Australia who was in yeshiva with us. His name was Barber. So we were very lucky that his father came to check up on his son, see what he's like, what he's doing. And I remember when he spoke for us in yeshiva, and I earlier spoke to him and reminded him a few of the stories. It's like, what? You remember from so back then? But what you say once can have a very long-lasting impression. And so, Mir Hashem, as Rabbi Barber, who came here, he's originally from Australia, now he's based in Crown Heights. I think you've been here before in Pittsburgh, before my times. But Rabbi Barber came here all the way to bring for us Yud Tes Kislev, so I'd like to call up Rabbi Barber for bring with you L'chaim, and come bring for the Olam. Just make sure you can. This is people online. Just make Sure, as long as you're visible.
As long as I'm visible. Chaim, l'chaim, everyone. In Tovshin Lamed Daled, Yud Tes Kislev, 1973, Yom Kippur War had only begun a few months before, and in Chabad, Reb Mendel Futterfass was Farbengen. And Reb Mendel quoted something that he'd heard from Rabbi Schneur Zalman, one of the great Chassidim. Rabbi Schneur Zalman said, we are well aware of the statement that we should never think that we do it all on our own, but rather everything is, oh, one second, I've touched something here. Whatever, what? All right, just keep on, I think I pressed something here, I don't know. That our success came from our own efforts. Says Rabbi Itcha, you have to have the koichi v'oitzim yodi. You need to have the strength for then you to turn around and say, but I recognize it's from the Eibishter. You can't sit back and hope that things will happen just on their own. And he went on to say, we know, Chazal tell us, that if somebody comes to cause you harm, hashkem. Don't wait for them to attack you, you attack them first. I say this because I'd like to dedicate tonight to a shliach who gave the ultimate price. He was a chayal in the true sense of the word. He was a chayal in Tzahal, Tzva Haganah Yisrael, Cyber Gashmius and Cyber Ruchnius. He was in the IDF and then he became a shliach of the Rebbe in the UAE, somebody I knew extremely well, very close with his brother, with his parents. And I'd like to dedicate tonight's Farbengen to Tzvi Kogan, Shem Yinkon Domov, and also for the safety of all of our chayalim, and that our chatufim, those who are kidnapped, should come home speedily. About 30 years ago, the then chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Schneur Zalman, who I had a very close friendship with, and I would pepper him and ask him to give me some advice when it came to public speaking. And he said to me once, he said, Yankee, don't worry about how you start your sermon. No one will remember. What they'll remember is how you finish. So make sure you finish on a high note. That was 35 years ago. Nowadays, I'm somewhat concerned that people won't last till you finish. That after a few minutes, they're already gone off to some other world. So I'd like to begin tonight with that which I normally would have finished with. And I'd like to begin, I do have roots here in Pittsburgh. I was here 8 years ago, and Baruch Hashem, I'm back, and I had the good fortune to see some of the moistest today, and it's beautiful, a city like Pittsburgh, Mesivta, Azal, and I hear there's a kollel. Credit to the Morad Asra, Rabbi Rosenfeld, and to the Kehillah. But my connection to Pittsburgh goes back a little bit more than that, and that is my late wife was a granddaughter of Rabbi Leibish Heber. Some people may still remember him. He was a very well-known individual in this community. His family had a connection, We're close with the Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe. So I'd like to begin to share with you a story that I heard from him with the Rebbe Rashab. So his father, Rabbi Yacov Tuvia, they were Alexander Chassidim from Lodz. And when the First World War broke out, as many Polish Jews did, they fled. And he came before the Yom Norom and he was looking for a Rebbe. Couldn't go back to Poland. And somebody said, you know, there's this city, a town called Lubavitch, and there's a Rebbe there. So he went, and as they say, the rest is history. He never left. From Lubavitch, when the Rebbe Rashab moved to Rostov, they moved as well. And he had a store on one of the streets of Rostov. And one day he came to the Rebbe Rashab and he said, I need a bracha, because I heard there's a pogrom that's about to happen, and I'm scared that they're going to destroy my store. So Rebbe Rashab sent two bochrim, and their job was to stand outside the store the whole night to protect it. How two bochrim who didn't have AK-47s on them could protect the store from these hooligans and these terrorists, for a better word. I don't know, but they did. And the next day, every single store on that street was destroyed besides that one store where the two bochrim were standing outside. No need to share miracle stories of the Rebbe Rashab, but rather to focus on the two bochrim, that they went with Mesiras Nefesh. They stood there the whole night. And we know by the Frierdiker Rebbe as well, there was this concept of Krisis Bris, that the Frierdiker Rebbe demanded that people should actually give their lives, ad Mesiras Nefesh b'poel, for his shlichus. Our Rebbe, on the other hand, to the best of my knowledge, never ever told somebody that they need to go on shlichus to the extent they may have to, and if need be do, give their lives. But on the other hand, what is unique by our Rebbe was that every single one of us, without exception, is a shliach. Whether you carry the label or whether you don't carry the label, that's what the Rebbe demanded from us. He demanded that each and every one of us needs to be a shliach. You know, in Perek Zayin of Tanya, it's brought down a very famous Maimer Chazal of a great rabbi called Rava, that he was an incredible educator. And the story goes that before he would teach his students, he would say to them a milsa de bedichasa, Trilo Bodcha Rabban, and he would tell them a joke and he'd make them feel good, they'd feel relaxed, and then he would share with them words of Torah. You know, that Rabbeinu Tam, what he would do is he would put gold coins on his table and he would be able to learn better. If I had bitcoins, I'd give them out to you and maybe you'd listen better, but I'd like to share with you, just like Rava did, Bodcha Rabbanon, and weave that in. You know, it reminds me of this guy. He moves into Pittsburgh and it's Erev Shabbos and he wants to get a challah for Shabbos. He goes to the local bakery and he says, how much is a challah? $10, sir. $10 for a challah, it's crazy. Flour and water. Yeah, $5 for the challah and $5 goes to Israel. You know what's going on in Israel at the moment. Okay, what's he going to say? He's not going to give the $10. He gives the $10. Comes back next week and he wants to get a babka cake. How much is a babka cake? That's $35, sir. $35 for a babka cake? Yeah, as I mentioned last week, $15 for the babka and $20 goes to Israel. This is outrageous. Look, if I want to give money to Israel, I know how to do it. I don't have to give it through a bakery. I'm sorry, sir, that's our policy. Comes back the next week, it's just before Shavuot, and he wants to buy a cheesecake. Sees a 7-inch cheesecake. How much is that? It's $100. $100? I know it's Chol of Yisrael, but that's absurd. Yeah, $50 for the cheesecake, $50 goes to Israel. Okay, that's enough. I need to speak to the manager. I said, that's no problem. And the girl goes to the back of the shop, she opens the door and she says, Israel, somebody's here to see you. We could speak about B'nai Yisrael, and we can speak about Rebbe Yisrael. And in actual fact, Yud Tes Kislev, Tovshin Chaf Aleph, in 1951, the Rebbe was reflecting on Yud Tes Kislev of Tafresh Pei Aleph of the Frierdiker Rebbe when he was Farbengen. And the Frierdiker Rebbe at that time said that the Alter Rebbe had Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, both for the individual and for the tzibur and for the community. And the Rebbe said that these are not two distinct and separate ideas. Somebody who's willing to have Mesiras Nefesh for the individual and somebody who's willing to have Mesiras Nefesh for the community, but really they're one and the same. Because how do you know if somebody's truly sincere that they want to have Mesiras Nefesh for a community? I mean, say to the average Jew, what would you do to save the lives of 1 million Jews? 6 million Jews? Well, of course. But if you want to know if they're sincere, ask them what they would do to save the life of one Jew. It reminds me in the Nuremberg trials, they had on sort of interrogating and on the witness stand a Nazi doctor. And in 1935, he had sent a Jewish doctor from Berlin to be murdered. And he said that if I would have known what the Nazis would do in the years that followed, I would never have sent an innocent Jewish doctor to his death. And the judge from the United States said, sorry, if you were willing to send one innocent man to his death, then there's no difference between one innocent man and 6 million. Which that is exactly the same idea. Save the life of one person, it's like saving the life of 6 million. It reminds me, I once heard a very beautiful story. It's a very famous shliach, perhaps he's got descendants here, Rav David Edelman. Passed away a few years ago. He was one of the elder shlichus for 50, 60, 70 years. And he said that in 1942, 42, 43, he was learning in 770, and he was standing, if you come upstairs, imagine you coming upstairs into 770 by the elevator there, where the Rebbe would give out dollars. And he was standing there with his dear friend, Reb Herschel Fogelman, who was also very famous and great shliach. And they were schmoozing, just, it was probably during recess. And the door from Gan Eden HaTachton opened up, and out came the Rebbe. The Rebbe was not Rebbe then, and he was referred to as a Ramash, Rebbe, and his first name, and Schneerson. And he said, do you want to hear something fresh off the press from the Frierdiker Rebbe? And they said, well, of course. So he said, I had a query, and I wanted to seek guidance from the Rebbe. What was my query? The query was that in those years, not many, I wish there would be more, but there were Jews who had made their way across from Europe. And in Europe, they were observant. But when they, reached Ellis Island, out went the tefillin and out went the yarmulke and the tzitzis. And they abandoned Yiddishkeit. But some of them would make their way into 770. And the Rebbe said, my approach was to embrace them, to welcome them, while others, some elder Chassidim, said that they felt it was inappropriate, this type of behavior. In a sense, perhaps you're giving a stempel. You're saying that what they're doing and their behavior is acceptable by you embracing them. And I really wasn't sure what to do. Imagine, so many years what the Rebbe developed. And I went to ask the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe said the following. When parents are blessed with a child, Their love for that child is, encompasses the whole world. And if they're blessed with a second child, then all of a sudden their heart grows larger and they embrace the second child with a tremendous amount of love. And then Friedrich Rebbe said, what happens if, God forbid, they're blessed with a child and the child is challenged, is not well, is not healthy, is not well? How do they relate to that child? And I'll share with you what the Rebbe said, Friedrich Rebbe, the words in Yiddish, and then we'll attempt to translate it in English. So Friedrich Rebbe said, for that particular child, for dem Kind, haben sie an eigenartige Liebschaft. They have a unique love, tremendous love, a love that goes beyond that which they experienced before. That you need to love them even more. And that, the Friedrich Rebbe said, is how we need to relate to those Jews who are unwell. He doesn't put tefillin on his left hand, so the left hand is weak. She doesn't light Shabbos candles, so her eyes are not as healthy. You need to love that person even more. And this is what I wanted to finish with. And that is to recognize and realize that we're all shluchim. And we may not build incredible moistus, big buildings. We may not be able to say we've got 500 people at a shir or 300 women at a challah. But every single Jew that we impact, one yid at a time, that's what the Rebbe wants from us. To recognize that there is no such thing as a small Jew. It reminds me, and it's quite appropriate that we're still in the era we lost, so to speak. I once said to Ramosha, I said to him that you're like the father of the shluchim. So he said, no, Yankee, the Rebbe is the father of the shluchim. So I said, okay, the Rebbe is the father, you're the feta, you're the uncle. You're the, everyone has that beloved uncle. Your parents don't want to buy something for you, don't want to give it to you. You go to the uncle will slip it, give it to you. I said, Rebbe says, the feta for the shluchim. I'm referring to Rav Moshe Kotlarski. So let me share with you something that Rav Moshe actually said in Yud Tes Kislev and Chabad. And we've heard the story from him many times, but it's worth repeating. So he was once in New Orleans. They were opening up a new Chabad center there. And he gets a phone call from Rabbi Chodakov, who was the Rebbe's main secretary. And Rabbi Chodakov said that you need to come back immediately back to New York. And he said, why? He said, well, you'll come back, you'll find out. So he takes the flight, next flight, he comes back. He goes into Rabbi Chodakov, and he said, why am I here? And Rabbi Chodakov says, you need to go to a particular city in the Caribbean. Okay, what am I going to do there? I'll let you know. Goes into the Rebbe, comes back. The Rebbe says, you're going to this city in the Caribbean, you should print a Tanya, and then you'll know what to do. One of those mysterious instructions. So he flies, couldn't get that day to the Caribbean, he went the next day, prints the Tanya, and he also organized to meet the head of the Jewish community. So after the meeting with the head of the Jewish community, he comes outside, and all of a sudden, somebody comes over to him and he says, this is a nest, this is a miracle. He says, what are you talking about? He says, you don't know. Me seeing you now, it's a miracle. You see, my name is Jaime Grossman, and I had a dream last night. My grandmother came to me in my dream, but let me give you a little bit of background. We came from Europe many, many years before. I was a little child when I arrived, and my grandmother, before she passed away, she said to me, I'm 5 years old, make sure you marry a Jewish girl. Marry at 5 years old, that was the last thing I was thinking about. No, you've got to promise me you're going to marry a Jewish girl. Okay, so I promised I'm going to marry a Jewish girl. And then she says to me, and if you ever have a problem, There's a Rebbe in New York, the Lubavitch Rebbe. You have a problem, go see him and he will help you. Now, time went on. I did marry a Jewish girl, had a boy. We're not really practicing. My son doesn't really practice. I don't really practice. But he's proud of being a Jew. He goes to school, and in the school, it's a religious school, and when the other students go to church to pray, all the Jewish kids play football outside. But they got a new bishop, and the new bishop said, no, this is totally unacceptable. Why kids, they don't want to go pray if the Jews are playing outside. The Jews have to come inside as well. Everyone's got to come in and pray. And my son said, no, he's not going. And he got into altercation with the bishop. The bishop pulled him. Anyway, this kid hit the bishop. The bishop fell to the ground. And as you could imagine, he's thrown out of school. So I don't know what to do. What do I do with my kid now? And last night my grandmother came to me in a dream and she said, I told you that if you have a problem, you need to contact the Lubavitch Rebbe and he's going to help you. I didn't even have a chance to do anything, and all of a sudden I see you. You're here. And I could tell, that you look like a Lubavitcher. So Moshe says to him, look, just before Purim, come to New York, come to the Farbengen, and then you'll ask the Rebbe what to do with your son. So he comes to New York, comes to the Farbengen, and then he writes a letter to Moshe. And he says to Moshe, look, I don't know if I can write a letter properly. I don't know how to write a letter to the Rebbe. Could you please write the letter for me? And he, more or less, in the letter tells what he would like Moshe to say to the Rebbe. And he signs off that this is written by a small Jew from Karasaya in the Caribbean. Okay. The Rebbe sends out an answer, and the Rebbe said to tell this fellow that every Yid has a neshama, which is a chelik elekam imal mamash, which is part of Hashem himself. And that being the case, there's no such thing as a small Jew. There's no such thing as a small Jew. When we interact with another Jew, what we have in front of us is a giant. We're a giant because we have a neshama, and they're a giant because they have a neshama. And the impact we can have on this particular Jew, one Jew at a time, we have no idea the impact that it can have. This was all an introduction, just in case you would have missed the ending. But now let's go back to the beginning. And as everyone got up here, everyone began by saying, as it's written on this wall there, I don't know how, either had a ladder or somebody climbed over from the other side, like they didn't ask me to do it. Good Yom Tov. We all say Good Yom Tov. I'd like to ask a question. Why? Why is Yud Tes Kislev Yom Tov? Now, if you say, well, the audacity of even asking such a question, I want you to know that the Gemara is 2,500 pages of questions. Why do we keep Shabbos? Why? Take nothing for granted. Always ask. So my question is, why is Yud Tes Kislev a Yom Tov? So perhaps we, our generation, we can best understand it by comparing Yud Tes Kislev to our own Yud Tes Kislev, which is Rosh Chodesh Kislev. When Rosh Chodesh Kislev is an ultimate simcha for Chassidim. Now, stop to think for a moment, what actually happened on Rosh Chodesh Kislev? On Rosh Chodesh Kislev, for those who were there, the Rebbe went home, picked himself up. He had actually gone a few days before, to the library, but here, he went out, went into the car, went home. There was no Chassidus, there was no Maimah, there was no dollars, there was no kosher bracha, there was no Sicha. He just physically went home. But for Chassidim that was enough. That the Rebbe was healthy, the Rebbe was gesund, the Rebbe was going home. What could be better than that? That was the ultimate. So on the most basic level, Yud Tes Kislev, like Rosh Chodesh Kislev, the Alter Rebbe was alive, physically alive. What could be greater than that? What a great gift to the world. The physical presence of the Rebbe, the physical presence of the Alter Rebbe. But then, of course, it's far greater than that, because we know after Yud Tes Kislev, similar to what happened after Rosh Chodesh Kislev, you stop to think the Giluim that the world experienced from Rosh Chodesh Kislev, Tafshin Lamed Ches, for so many years later, the Maimarim, the Chassidus, the Farbengens, the dollars, it changed the world as we know it, similar to Yud Tes Kislev. Far Peterburg or Noch Peterburg. So therefore, Yud Tes Kislev is a Yom Tov. We say, good Yom Tov. But now the ultimate question is, what exactly is Chassidus? You know, I don't know if you ever stop to think, what exactly is Chassidus? Can you give a very brief answer in one sentence what Chassidus is? And if you're going to tell me that, of course I know what Chabad Chassidus is, Chochmah bin Adas, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, I would say thank you very much. And what does that mean? Well, I can tell you what Chochmah bin Adas is. You've got a mathematical problem on the board, and when you solve it, you can go out for recess, and you have no idea what the answer is, and then, boom, you get like a blink. Wow, I think I know the answer. And somebody, your friend comes in, you ready? No, don't talk to me. It's here. I nearly got it. Come back in 15 minutes. And then you need to reflect. That's binah. But then what's going to happen is you may forget it. So then you need das to ensure that you remember the answer a week later. And that's everything in life. Chochmah bin das. But that's not Chassidus per se. That's true with any form of intellectual knowledge. So what exactly is Chassidus? That we are so much besimcha that we were given Chassidus. Now this is not a question that I asked, and you should expect and be happy with my answer. There was actually a question posed by German rabbis to the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe was once in Berlin, and he was staying in a very fancy, luxurious hotel. And a delegation of German rabbis came to see him. And Chassidus really hadn't spread that much to Berlin. And they came and they really were interested to know what is this novel approach to Jewish life called Chassidus. So Frierdiker Rebbe said, could you please describe the room to me? They look around and they start describing the room and the pillars and the marble and beautiful room. Frierdiker Rebbe gets up and they accompany him, and he walks very close to one of the pillars, and there's a lamp there, a desk lamp, and he picks up the desk lamp and he places it on the pillar. And he says, what do you see now? He said, well, now we see etchings and carvings and the colors and how they blend. It's magnificent. Frierdiker Rebbe said, you know, they were always there. The etchings, the carvings, the indentations, the coloring. But the difference is we now put a light, a spotlight, on the pillar. And that which was always there is now revealed. That's what Chassidus is. Frierdiker Rebbe said that the Baal Shem Tov said that every single Jew can serve Hashem, which was a novel chiddush at the time. The Alter Rebbe told us how. Frierdiker Rebbe said it's like a ladder. The Alter Rebbe told us how to climb the ladder, because life is a journey. And the question is, what is that journey? Where does this journey take us? What does Chassidus try to accomplish? So I'd like to share with you an insight into Chassidus, because this is Yud Tes Kislev, Rosh Hashana of Chassidus, so we should speak some Chassidus. And I had the pleasure, good fortune of speaking to the boys in Zal. And as I said to them, I'm going to share something with you now, but don't leave. Because if you leave now, I'll get a terrible name. I said to them, don't learn Chassidus. Huh? It's Erev Yud Tes Kislev, and here Shliach comes, a rabbi comes to Farbengen with them, and he tells them, don't learn Chassidus. I said, if you leave now, I'm in trouble. You've got to stay till the end. And they said, it reminds me in my synagogue, in my Chabad house in Melbourne, on the high holidays, you get, hundreds and hundreds of people, mostly non-observant. Most of the children didn't go to Jewish day school, but they would go to Sunday school. Sometimes I'd get up and I'd begin the sermon by saying, do not send your children to Sunday school. And get this shock. Well, why not? And I would say to them, do you know why you shouldn't send your children to Sunday school? Because what will your child learn in Sunday school? They're going to learn that Moses didn't walk on water, he caused the water to split. 3 Arabs came to visit Abraham as he was sitting outside a tent. And then, when they reach 19, 20, 21, 22 or 30 and they've got challenges with life, where are they going to turn to for help? The last place they're going to turn to is to Judaism, because Judaism tells them about 3 Arabs who need to get their feet washed. It's not going to answer life's problems, but if they never go to Sunday school, then maybe, just maybe, they'll say, do you know what? I'm a Jew. What does Judaism have to say about my issue? And the same thing I said about Chassidus. The trouble is, when we learn Chassidus, we look at Chassidus as being, a study, it's intellectual, lahavdil, it's like anatomy, or it's like astrology, or geometry. It's intellectual, but it has nothing to do with me. It doesn't impact me. It has no bearing on my life. It's not going to change me. And that's the problem. We don't realize what Chassidus really is. And that's why I said, don't learn Chassidus, meaning say, don't learn Chassidus the way that we think that we are learning Chassidus, but rather realize that Chassidus is a roadmap. It's a life roadmap of how we need to lead our lives. And what I want to do, I want to share with you, again from the Rebbe, about Chassidus. And I shared this at another Chabad house, and the next day, it was over Shavuos, the next day a typical Jewish buba stopped me. She was an ex-police officer, covered in tattoos, so she's the, typical Yiddish buba. And she says to me that, Rabbi, I have suicidal tendencies, but after what you said last night, you gave me a new perspective on life. And she got emotional, and so did I, because more often than not, you think you're speaking to the brick wall, but it looked like somebody was actually listening. And I'd like to show you how Chassidus gave her a different approach and understanding of life and helped her in her battle with these suicidal tendencies. Can't go through all of it, time doesn't permit, but we're going to do a little bit. Every single person needs a mission statement. Every business needs a mission statement. And if your business has a mission statement, then you need to have a mission statement. Does anyone here have a mission statement? What is the Jewish mission statement? Do Jews have a mission statement? I would venture to suggest that we do. The mission statement we have is, every morning when we wake up, before we put our hand out to grab our cell phone to make sure the world is still standing and still in existence, we actually say a prayer. We say Moedani. And that, I would like to humbly suggest, is the Jewish mission statement. You know what's interesting? Somebody once asked the Rebbe's mother, Rebbe Tzimchana, what is your son's favorite prayer? What's his favorite? It's a good question. She said, I don't know, but I'll ask him. And you know what? the answer response was? Moidani. So what I would like to do now is, based on the Rebbe's teachings, I would like to take the Moidani and I want to show you what Chassidus does to the Moidani. On a very basic level, when you wake up in the morning, what is the theme and the message of Moidani? We're thanking Hashem for what? Anyone? What are we thanking Him for? Oh, good. Glad you're not in my class. Yo, come on. You say it every morning. What are you thanking Him for? Thank you. Yo. Top of the class. Beat the buzzer. We thank Him because we're alive, which is a good thing. We heard before, I would imagine, that, I used to have elderly members in my congregation. After morning davening shachris, I say, Bob, how are ya? Australian, that's how we talk. Rabbi, walk to synagogue, walking home, it's a good day. The fact that we're alive is a wonderful thing. I remember I was 48 at the time in Melbourne. I was involved in Czarist, and I had gone into the kosher butcher store to check out the hashgacha. People say that could have been the reason. Later on, I realized while I was in the butcher store, I actually had a heart attack, probably because I saw the price of kosher meat. And so I ring up my late wife and I say, I don't feel good. And we're going to America the next day because my son's about to become a chassan. She said, you know what, maybe come home, rest up. Do you want me to pick you up? I said, nah, I'll get it. Anyway, I get into the car, and around the corner there's this hospital, a good Catholic hospital where all the Jews go. So I park my car, make sure I won't get a ticket, and I walk in, and they have emergency, and I say, I think I'm having a heart attack. So she takes my pulse, which I now realize that you can't tell if you have a heart attack taking pulse, and she said, no, you're not. I said, okay. But since in Australia the health system works a little bit different, since it's a private hospital and I'm a private patient, so they'll make money off me, they admitted me. So there I am, 4 or 5 hours doing battery of tests. Cut a long story short, I actually did have a heart attack, spent 10 days in hospital, and then I left, and when I went out of the glass doors, became rather emotional. 10 days before I came in with a heart attack, young guy, and now I'm able to go home. 5 weeks later, I went to visit a congregant of mine in the same hospital. It was a bit eerie, the feeling. And then I walked out of the hospital. And then I said to myself, Yankee, you just walked out of the hospital. The last time you walked out of this hospital, you were very emotional, and you were thanking Hashem you're alive, and now you take it for granted. So what I did was I actually went back inside. Anyone who saw me must thought I was nuts. I walked back inside, stopped, reflected, and walked out and thanked Hashem that I'm alive. So on a very basic level, Moida Ani is saying, thank you that I'm alive. What does Chassidus do? Do you know what Chassidus does to the Moida Ani? Or v'chayis, as the Rebbe Rashab says, it illuminates and it gives it vitality, it gives it life. Let's go through to the Moida Ani. What's the key word? We don't say thank you Hashem that I'm alive. We say thank you Hashem that you gave me back. Nishma. Phew. Lucky we don't have a choir here going. You got to finish off. You got to finish it off. Nishma. Thank you. Nishmati. He gave me back my neshama. You know what that means? When I wake up in the morning, I realize the Eibishter is tapping me on the shoulder and saying, Yankee, Devoiri, Miriam, Moshe, I need you. That's why you're here. What an empowering thought. What an empowering thought. All of a sudden, I am needed. You know why people get depressed? I'm not talking about clinical depression, chemical depression. I'm talking about generally why do people feel down? Because they feel unwanted. They feel people don't see them anymore. They're not needed for anything. Reminds me of Rabbi Krinsky. He once shared with me that the Rebbe once called him in and he said, could you please contact my accountant? So even Rebbes have accountants. And the Rebbe's accountant was a man by the name of Mr. Telushkin. his son wrote the book, Rabbi Telushkin, and this Mr. Telushkin, his father was Rabbi Nissen Telushkin, who was part of a good Chassidic Chabad. And Rabbi Krinsky said to him, do you know that Mr. Telushkin is deathly ill? The Rebbe said, yeah, I know, but ask him anyway. All right. He rings up the son and he says, the Rebbe asked me if you could please ask your father about something about, I don't know what. And he said, you know, my father's dying. My father's in hospital. So I said, I know, I told it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe said, nonetheless. Anyway, he passed away, got the answer, but he did pass away not much later. And Rabbi Krinsky went to Menachem Abel, and Rabbi Telushkin said to him, I want you to know that the happiest day in my father's life over these last 6 months was the day when I asked him that the Rebbe needs him for something. Because all of a sudden, he wasn't in a bed waiting to be taken out. All of a sudden, there was something that he could do on planet Earth that no one else could. He was needed for something. What an empowering thought. You know, most of us think to themselves, there's 6 billion, I don't know how many billions of people there are. Billions of people before us, billions of people are. What impact, what difference, what... And all of a sudden, no. We can make a difference. What that difference is, the Baal Shem Tov says, and the Neshama comes down here to earth, 60, 70 years. Begashmis and Beruchnius, first Gashmis and then Ruchnius. I always say if you put your head on a pillow at night and you're able to say that you made somebody smile, that was a good day. We could develop this idea, but I want to do one more part. We could keep on going with the Modani. Now you know why Chassidim sometimes battle to get out of bed in the morning, because they're going through all of the Pirushim of the Modani. It can take a long time. But I want to do something else. And this, if the world would lead and have this approach, as Chassidus says to Modani, it would be a different world. But it can impact your life, your family's life, community life, and the world at large. And that is the drush, or the homiletic interpretation of the Modani. Let's take, for example, you've got a beautiful car, new car, beautiful, you love your car. There was a guy in Melbourne, very, very wealthy guy, and he had a Rolls Royce, but he was a tzaddik of a yid. And any time a girl, a kala, wanted to borrow the Rolls Royce to go to the chuppah, he would always give it. He said a kala, Jewish bride, should go as royalty, and therefore they could use a Rolls Royce. So just say you have got a Rolls Royce, or let's say for women, you've got this beautiful dress for your daughter's wedding, and somebody wants to borrow it, why not? And then they give it back and there's a bit of a tear there. You'll get it fixed. Or there's a dent in the car. There will come a time when you will say, I would imagine, Dayenu. I mean, how many times can you rip, make a hole, or put a dent in the car? And you're going to say, no,